Hello, readers. Our next book of the day is Knit Your Bit, a World War I story, written by Deborah Hobkinson. What do you notice? Wow, those are cool. Knit Your Bit. When Pop left to be a soldier, I wanted to go with him. Penn Station. I'm brave, I told Pop. I know, Mikey, he said, patting my shoulder. And you'll need to be, 'cause it takes just as much courage to stay behind. Back home, Mama pulled out her knitting needles. Our soldiers will be cold come winter. Teach me, Ellie begged. I want to help. What about you, Mikey? Mama asked, fishing out more needles. No way, boys don't knit, I said. Besides, I want to do something big to help. Ellie finished her first hat a few days later. It wasn't much to look at, but she wrapped it up to send to Pop right away. You could knit him something too, Mikey. Like I said, sis, knitting is for girls. No, it's not, Ellie cried, grabbing the newspaper. Everyone's helping. Look at these firemen, and even President Wilson keeps sheep on the White House lawn for wool. If we each do a little, it makes something big, she said. I just rolled my eyes. Oh, wait. Let's reread that. My apologies. Look at these firemen, and even President Wilson keeps sheep on the White House lawn for wool. Ellie turned the page. Our boys need socks. Knit your bit. See, if we each do a little, it makes something big, she said. I just rolled my eyes. Central Park, Knitting Bee, prizes. Prizes for the best hats, socks, scarves. 3 days of knitting. For our soldiers in need. 50 cents entry fee. A few days later, Miss Robin tacked a poster on the bulletin board. Wouldn't it be great if students from our class entered the knitting bee? Miss Robin asked. All the boys, including me, jeered. Mikey, you're always talking about how brave you are, Sarah said. This is your chance to help. But I bet you're scared you can't learn. Me? Scared? My friends and I can beat you any day. Mikey, sit down, Nick hissed. Dare you to enter, the girls cried all together. It's a deal. Boys against girls. We'll call our team the Boys Knitting Brigade. I thought that sounded big and important enough. Fine, said Josie. We'll be the Pearl Girls. Girls? I didn't even know what pearl meant. I gulped. What had I gotten us into? Mama offered to give us lessons. Nick and Dan came over every day after school to practice. After we figured out how to hold our needles and knit, which was hard enough, Mama even showed us how to purl. Nick was the major of mufflers. I was the sergeant of socks, which are not easy, believe me, especially the heels. As for Dan, well, mostly his yarn just got tangled. Our cat loved it. Finally, the day of the knitting bee arrived. Central Park was a sea of women and men, old and young, and lots of girls. Forward march, I commanded. Mikey, we're the only boys, whispered Nick. I sure hope we don't get laughed out of here. Look at that food. When do we eat? Dan asked. Those sausages smell delicious. Over here, boys, called Miss Robin. Naturally, the Pearl girls were ready to go. Sarah smiled sweetly, but she was all business. Game face. Get ready to be beaten by the fastest knitters in New York City. I led my troops to a nearby bench. Ignore those girls, soldiers. Speed isn't everything. There are prizes for the best knitting, too. We unraveled our yarn and grabbed our needles. The band struck up a rousing march. Drummers beat tin buckets, with knitting needles, of course. Rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat. Cast on! My men performed with courage, mostly. Dan came close to deserting us for the food tables, and Nick got distracted watching Mrs. Rizzo's flying fingers. She won a prize for knitting a sweater, 5 hours and 45 minutes exactly. We knit all afternoon, and the next day, too. By the third day, the pressure was on. Dan's piece looked more like an old dish rag than a hat. Nick was still clicking away, though the edges of his muffler were all zigzaggy because he kept adding stitches or dropping them. I'd finished one sock yesterday. Now I was on my second. I was feeling pretty good. That first sock was definitely my best yet. Maybe I'd even win a prize for the pair if I could get the second one done by the end of the day. Ellie offered to bring me some lunch, but I just shook my head. Oh, you're doing so good, Mikey. Let me see. Ellie gave a little gasp. Oh no, Mikey, look, she whispered. A hole. You dropped a stitch right at the beginning there. Somehow I'd missed it, but Ellie was right. To make it perfect, I'd have to rip the whole sock apart and start over again. I hung my head. Knitting was stupid. I felt like breaking my needles and stomping on everything. Nice work, kid. I glanced up. A young soldier stood before me. He nodded toward my one perfect sock on the bench. Thank you, sir, I stammered. I was still feeling miserable. But I'm really not so good at this. Well, you're trying, aren't you? That's what counts. We were silent a minute. You got someone over there? Yes, sir. My dad, I told him. All at once, I missed Pop so much. My eyes stung. I wondered where he was. I could almost see him hiding in a muddy ditch or shivering in the rain. How could anything I do, little or big, really help? Warm wool socks would have felt mighty cozy last winter, the soldier said. So you keep on knitting, kid. I bet your dad will be real glad to wear those socks. Yes, sir. I wasn't sure what to do next, so I stood and saluted. Then I took the sock apart and began again. Needles down, Sarah had finished a muffler. Molly had made a pair of socks. And Josie's hat was perfect. "Now let's see how you did," said Sarah. For a minute, we stood in silence. Finally, Dan said, "I guess my yarn got a little greasy from the sausages." We all laughed. I held out my hand to Sarah. "You beat us fair and square." "No hard feelings, Mikey?" "Nah, just wait till next time." I never did finish that pair of Central Park Knitting Bee socks. Instead, just before we left, I got up my courage and found the young soldier. "Here, this is for you." I held out my best ever perfect sock. "Gee, thanks, kid," he said. "And don't give up." "I won't," I promised. As for what happened after that, well, Nick and Dan never went near knitting needles again, but all by herself. Ellie made hats for every soldier in Pop's unit. They sent her a picture of themselves. As for me, I did keep trying, and though it took a while, I finally knit a pair of socks for Pop. He wrote back to say they were his favorites. He promised to wear them on the day he came home. And he did. It says you can still knit your bit. Knitting for soldiers overseas continues to this day. Visit with your local yarn store or knitting guild to find a group in your area, or check these websites. Fantastic, guys. What a fun summer project that would be. Knit your bit.